Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop. I'm responsible for running the ICG's webinar programme. So in today's webinar, we'll be hearing from Theo Francis, who's owner and managing director of Guinea Pig Fieldwork and one of the co-founders of CORE, or Colour of Research. Colour of Research advocates for the inclusion of ethnic professionals in the market research industry. Its aim is to provide guidance and encouragement while forging meaningful connections to enable growth and development. CORE's mission is to be seen and heard in an industry they love, but in which they are currently underrepresented. Having previously been involved in racial activism projects long before his career in research, the CORE message is close to Theo's heart and something he wears on his chest with pride. As director of CORE, Theo is responsible for organisational development and oversight, branding, and assisting with strategic long-term planning. In his talk, Theo will be taking us through the key principles of CORE and some of the initiatives that they are putting in place to increase the ethnic diversity of our industry, breaking apart the term BAME, demonstrating some of the pitfalls of Nat Rep sampling, and discussing key principles for better inclusion and diversity within our market research work. As usual, there'll be a Q&A session at the end, so do please type in your questions in the question box as we go along, and I'll read them out when Theo has completed his presentation. So we're really grateful to Made in Studios for sponsoring this webinar. Made in Studios is an MIS Group brand offering the most modern and stunning viewing facilities in Birmingham and across France, in Paris, Lyon and Lille. Here are the next webinars to note in your diaries. Some of these are already open for registration on our website. Don't forget that we're able to offer great value sponsorship opportunities with each of our webinars. Sponsorship normally costs £100 for a great deal of exposure on our website, mailers and social media, and of course on the day. Please contact Lucy if you'd like to know more about this. I'd like to point out as well that on Thursday the 17th of December we have a second webinar on the same theme as this. This time there'll be a £10 fee charged for it. It'll be a slightly longer training webinar. So before I hand over to Theo, I'd also like to announce, I'm very pleased to announce that we now have a new ICG committee member, Iris Griffiths, who's responsible for inclusion and diversity. So if you have any comments or suggestions, you can contact Iris on inclusion@theicg.co.uk. So our speaker today is Theo Francis from Guinea Pig Fieldwork and CORE, and I'll now hand over to Theo. Are you there, Theo?
Oh, just on mute. Thank you very much, guys, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It's really my pleasure to be presenting to this wonderful community that I'm proud to be a member of. Today, I'm going to be speaking with you about a number of different things. We're going to touch on the origins of CORE, how we came to be, some of the key initiatives we're putting in place to increase the diversity of our industry, the BAME word, Nat Rep samples, the importance of diverse research teams, and why the time has come for race to no longer be a taboo subject. We've got a lot to get through here, guys, so I hope you're comfortable in your seats. You've made your cup of tea already, because yeah, we're about to get into it. So what is CORE? So Colour of Research, or CORE, is a non-profit organisation that launched earlier this year and champions the cause of racial diversity in the market research industry. Our creation story is really quite organic. I mean, even before we came together, each of us in the founding team had already been having conversations with people about the lack of representation we'd noticed when attending networking events and conferences. You know, we'd look around and it's like, you know, spot the brown person. At the time, this was before COVID, this is before George Floyd. Race wasn't as hot topic as it is today, but we in the ethnic research community were talking about it because we saw that, you know, there were great organizations like WIRE, like MRS Pride, but there was no organization that we knew of that represented us. So, although none of us are what you might call D&I experts, we decided to create that organization for ourselves. The founding team consists of Bob Qureshi of iView, Charlene Adama of Bilendi, Sia Najumi of One Global Translations, Tatenda Msasengwa of YouthSite, Melissa Gonzalez of Differentology, Graham Edahin of Lucid, Natalie Samuel of Ipsos, and little old me. So we pre-launched in June, officially launched in July, and now 3 months later have just over 500 members globally, 12 or so initiatives that we're working on, and are currently looking to expand the team in order to keep up with the overwhelming appetite for this thing that we've created. So I'm going to run you through some of the key initiatives that we've been working on and working on putting in place. The first one is the one that we started with, which is our Each One Teach One mentorship program. So despite the lack of representation, we do have some real ethnic success stories in our industry. People who, despite facing the challenges of discrimination or not having quite the same level of progression opportunities as their white counterparts, managed to make a success of themselves against the odds. But more often than not, they've had to do that alone without the guidance of someone who's been in their shoes and can help navigate them through the unique challenges that people who look like us face. We wanted to create something that provided that for the next generation. And that was the ethos behind the Each One Teach One mentorship program. It is a program for ethnic successes to mentor ethnic up-and-comers. And that's not to say that successful white professionals have nothing to offer our mentees. On the contrary, we want our allies to contribute to the upskilling of the mentees. And we have a whole area for this called the masterclasses, which I'll get to shortly. But the mentorship program is about empathy and shared experience. It's about creating that safe space for our mentees who might be experiencing issues based on their ethnicity and partnering them up with someone who gets it because they've lived it themselves. This next initiative is all about bringing more people of ethnic backgrounds into our industry. There's a number of different ways that we're trying to achieve this. We're in talks with universities and schools to arrange talks with the young people, trying to entice them to consider a career in research. On the agency side of the desk, there is a barrier to entry in that entry-level jobs require a university degree. And due to a number of different factors, it's common knowledge that less young people from ethnic backgrounds are ending up in the top universities, which is where many of these agencies have traditionally chosen to recruit from. So trying to create more routes into the industry for people who may not be university educated, we're working with the MRS towards the development of a government-backed apprenticeship scheme. We have a job board for companies looking to recruit ethnic talent and are working towards partnering with various recruitment agencies to help source the ethnic candidates. And we're also calling for changes to be made to current recruitment practices and working towards developing guidelines for the best practice in this area. And this is where we get onto the round table. The recruitment practice is actually the topic of the first roundtable discussion, which took place 2 weeks ago and featured some industry thought leaders that you can see there on the right-hand side. So the purpose of our roundtable series is again to collaboratively hammer out what the best practice should be. From the moment we launched, we realized that we were going to need help with this. I mean, we stepped up on the soapbox and said, hey, this is important. Changes need to be made. And the industry turned around and said, oh, we're so glad you're here. We completely agree. How do we do it? I mean, we don't have all the answers. You know, systemic racism and discrimination is something that's ingrained in society. It's been going on for hundreds of years. You think 8 people are suddenly just going to have all the answers? No, this is something that we as an entire industry are going to have to brainstorm and debate and question again. The roundtable is our platform for these discussions, each one tackling a different aspect of racial inequality and trying to find solutions together that we can eventually distill into that step-by-step guideline that the industry, who overall we found really want to do the right thing, they're so desperately waiting for that guideline. So that is what we're trying to build with the roundtables. The Spotlight Initiative. So this is our platform for putting the spotlight on the ethnic excellence that we have in our industry. The idea behind this is that, for the most part, if you can't see it, you can't be it. The lack of relatable role models is one of the explanations cited for the lack of upward mobility in senior leadership roles among ethnic professionals. In a nutshell, because they don't see it, the expectation that they'll be able to do it is lower, and everyone knows you have to believe it to achieve it. So by showcasing the success stories, we're hoping that we can inspire the younger generation to believe that they can be the senior leaders of tomorrow. And we're doing this via our Success Stories podcast, where we listen to the life stories of these people, and also by creating a speakers shortlist so that we can see more of these people speaking at major events. We're also creating what we've called the diversity directory. So many agencies have come to us asking if we can put them in touch with freelancers, moderators, recruitment agencies run by ethnically diverse professionals so that they can diversify their pool of vendors. There are many out there, but they've been mostly invisible for a long time. So again, we're trying to do what we can to shine the light on these professionals and give them more opportunities to get their name out there. Finally, I'm going to talk to you about our allyship opportunities. Not only do we welcome the support, we are calling for the support of our allies for what we're trying to achieve here. We've created 4 different avenues for this. The first is a bit of a no-brainer. Now, we're a non-profit run by 8 everyday people who all have day jobs, trying to move mountains in our free time. Now, we've done a lot with no funding, but if we're really going to achieve what we want to, we need some fuel in the tank. So that comes in the form of sponsorships on a company level, and there are different tiers that I won't get into in this talk. On an individual level, there are some really interesting options. So someone could be an advocate, which involves utilizing your resources to help us spread the word. You can be a teacher in our masterclass series, which is what I mentioned earlier. So if you have a specialist skill or you're really knowledgeable on a particular subject that could help our mentees reach that next level in their career, we will work with you to record an hour, a 90-minute masterclass exclusive for our mentees. And we've actually recently completed our first one with Lynn Rosamond, who's a public speaking guru. And that was really mind-blowing, some of the insights that she's given in that. Finally, you can be a volunteer. I mentioned that we're looking to expand the team because, you know, this thing is growing every day and we need as many hands on deck as we can get. So that's who we are. That's what we're doing. But now let's get into the real purpose of this talk, which is how we as independent researchers, field workers, recruiters, etc., can apply some of the principles of D&I to our market research work. So one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today is the term BAME, or BAME, or BME in some places. You know, what does it mean? Why do people use it? So for anyone who hasn't come across the term, BAME stands for Black, Asian, and Minority Ethnic. I don't know why Black and Asian are the only ethnicities that get a mention. I guess because if we put every in that acronym, it wouldn't sound very nice. Sort of like with gender, there are many people who struggle to get their head around more than two identities. It would seem that certain people also struggle to get their head around more than two ethnicities, which is why we fall back to black and white, or BAME and white in this case. Essentially, what the BAME term does is put anyone who isn't white into one non-white category. It's simple, it's easy to manage, and after all, we're talking about a mere 13% of the UK population. And if we start breaking this down, there's so many ethnicities, where will it end? Better just to lump them all together after all. I mean, they're all the same. If any of you are feeling slightly uncomfortable about what I've just said, I don't blame you. That's the point. That's the message that we hear when we hear the term BAME. We're not all the same. Yes, there are certain similarities, certain issues that we all face, such as, levels of racism. But even those issues that we share vary in their severity between the different ethnic groups. How much does a Black Caribbean person have in common with an Indian person simply on the basis of their race? I'm not talking about their individual personalities, they might be best friends, but we both like spicy food, we're both brown. I'm struggling. The religion is different, the culture is different, the movies are different, the music is different, the family pressures are different, the way that we're viewed in society is different. Yet, because we're not white, we're the same. Our unique issues are all the same. How does that make any sense? We see the headlines everywhere these days, BAME this, BAME that. But are these actually BAME issues? Let's take an easy one. Why are people from BAME backgrounds, more people from BAME backgrounds dying from coronavirus? Okay, let's have a look at that one. Well, here are the statistics taken from the Institute for Fiscal Studies. As you can see, mixed ethnicities are dying almost 3 times less than that of white British from coronavirus. Chinese people, about half the rate. Other white, Bangladeshi, both lower rates. Sure, Black African, Pakistani, other Asian, white Irish, slightly higher. Indian, a bit higher still. But for the most part, it's pretty average. It's other Black, where it starts to get really high. Black Caribbean, where it skyrockets. And then other ethnic groups, which apparently in the notes of this graph, it says that includes Arab, that seem to be affected the most. So why is this framed as a BAME issue when it's quite clearly a Black Caribbean, other Black, or Arab or this other ethnic group problem? This is one example of how BAME ain't the same, yet in most of the research that's conducted, BAME is the same. Not just in what we are, but also where we are, which brings me to the next thing I want to talk about today, which is the Nat Rep samples. So what is a Nat Rep sample? I'd imagine most of you watching are fully aware what a Nat Rep sample is, but just for anyone who isn't, Nat Rep is supposed to be a research sample that reflects the entire population of the country in question. At its best, it will match the national proportions of gender, age, socioeconomics, ethnicity, and more. Why is Nat Rep so problematic? Now, I'd imagine that most of you here today are primarily qualies like me, I would guess, considering it's the ICG. But I'm going to start with quant samples. Panel companies are rarely able to provide truly representative sample within time and budget constraints. I've mentioned ethnic minorities are often grouped as a sort of monolith, meaning individual ethnic groups are rarely represented proportionately. And data weighting, which is the tool that we tend to use in quant to make up for sample bias, is often problematic and overdone to the point of jeopardizing the significance of the data itself. So I'm not an expert in quant, my realm is mostly qual. So I reached out to someone who is an expert in quant, Gurleen Sargu from Lucid, And here's what she had to say. Age, gender, and location are generally the only quotas considered for Nat Rep Sample. When ethnicity is factored into the equation, I've personally seen data weighting of 1.8, 2.0, and more, which is far higher than would be acceptable for other quotas such as gender. If clients demanded more ethnic representation, we would find a way, but most of the time, it's not something that clients are particularly interested in. Okay, so I've been having conversations with quite a few brands recently. Just yesterday, I spoke with, I don't know if I can say the name, but they're one of the biggest banks in the world, and they are actively looking to make the samples they research more reflective of the actual UK population in terms of ethnicity. So there are brands out there that want this, but with the current situation as it is, it's difficult and costly. Through the work that I do with CORE and also with the MRS D&I Council, I've heard many different reasons for why it's so difficult, and something that keeps coming up is what I've dubbed the vicious cycle of quant. It starts with the fact that ethnic minorities are a low incidence target on most panels. I'm sure you already know any low incidence target comes at a higher cost. The increased cost inevitably leads to lower demand. The lower demand leads to less investment. And what I mean by that is panel companies have no incentive to really work towards increasing the ethnic minority membership on their panels because hardly anyone is really asking for them. This then puts us back at square one where ethnic minorities are low incidence and that cycle continues. What I'm showing you here is what we're trying to help bring about, which is the opposite. It's the virtuous cycle, which could be achieved, in my opinion, if truly national representative samples in terms of ethnicity were the norm. And it starts with an increase in demand, as Gurleen said. If clients asked for it, then they would find a way. So the result would be more investment in panels, more efforts made to find ethnic people for their membership. More investment would mean that ethnic minorities would be higher incidence, and as such, the cost would go down. The lower cost, I expect, would increase the demand, and the cycle would continue from there. It sounds very simple. It isn't simple, but it is something that I believe in time could happen if we as an industry and as a society overall continue to promote and advocate this as a matter of importance. Now for the bit that I'd expect most of you will be more interested in, the qual side of the coin. So one of the initiatives that we're working on at CORE is the City Rep Pledge. So that calls for research agencies to base the benchmark of their ethnic diversity in terms of their workforce on the city that they're based in and not the country overall. And this has now been included into the MRS CEO pledge. But when we announced this pledge, many people, mostly working in qual, misunderstood that we were talking about the workforce and thought that we were talking about samples. And it got us thinking, this is true. Why would you base the ethnic makeup of your focus groups or your depths on national demographics? It doesn't really make sense. I've got a few examples for you of projects that I've worked on in the past that really highlight that. So I work in field work. I always have. It's always been my role to identify and recruit participants of the research studies that our clients commission. Some time ago, I worked on a project for a famous superhero franchise. The client wanted 3 groups of teenagers in London who had seen the movie. In the first group, we had 7 white kids, 1 Asian kid. The client was fine. Second group were all white kids. Again, happy client. In the third group, we had 3 white kids, 3 black kids, and 2 Asian kids. I called the client after the groups were finished and was told, "You really let us down on this last group. My client isn't happy. We need to redo it." I'm kind of stunned. I asked, what was wrong with the group? What happened? Well, there were too many ethnics. The group wasn't representative of the UK. Now, London is 40 41 point something% ethnic, according to the latest statistics. 40% of the 24 children would have been 9 or 10 of them being from ethnic backgrounds, but our client was basing his benchmark on the UK overall instead of the actual area that we were conducting the research in. The next project I want to talk to you about highlights the other side of the problem. So this was in-home interviews with new mums using baby milk formula. They wanted 80 mums across the UK, 10 per location, so there's 8 locations. And this client felt like they were a bit more progressive. They wanted to make sure that each group of 10 was nationally representative, which to them meant 2 ethnic respondents in each location. And that worked out fine in most of the areas, but there's one in particular which was a complete shambles, and that was Carlisle, which is 94.36% white. So for the best part of a week, I had a recruiter up there visiting pharmacies, corner shops, stalking the streets, looking for the one brown person in the village. Needless to say, it didn't really work out. But this next example is a recent study that really interested me. It's an online community with women in Barking and Dagenham, Redbridge and Newham. The client wanted to make sure that within each borough, we had a perfect split to represent the cultures that lived there. The result you can see in this grid. You know, it's different in each area. And this is still within London. And the reason why they needed to go so granular was never really clear in the spec, but I assumed it must have something to do with race or culture or something like that. It turned out, actually, no, it was about energy bills. The race was pretty much irrelevant. They just wanted to make sure that the research reflected the communities that lived in those areas. So using ethnicity statistics of cities rather than just a blanket Nat Rep quota, this is what truly representative focus groups of 8 people would look like in different cities around the UK. As you can see, the numbers vary from place to place because that's the reality of the UK. Let's look at Leicester, for example. Only half the group would be white. But this is what fair representation in focus groups currently looks like. You know, you tend to get 6 or 7 white, 1 or 2 not white. And more often than not, this is what happens, whereas all white and not white, who cares? And I think we should change it. I think for qual at least, it's fairly easy to do. We just look up the ethnic statistics of the area that we're conducting our research in, and we use that as a guide for how the sample should be split. Granted, with the rise of online qual due to COVID and projects being commissioned where it's nationwide recruitment for just one focus group, that's going to be a bit more difficult to manage, and we may need to fall back to Nat Rep for those ones. But when it is localized, why is this not the norm? It seems to me an easy win for the industry, and it's what I've been trying to incorporate into my projects, Guinea Pig. So I'm going to move on from Nat Rep now and talk to you about sympathy versus empathy. By definition, sympathy is acknowledging someone's struggle, feeling pity or sorrow for that struggle, whereas empathy, on the other hand, is actually understanding what that person is feeling because you've had a similar experience yourself. Now, it's often taken as a given that if you're a good researcher, you can connect with anyone from any walk of life. And sometimes, sure, anyone can connect with anyone. At the base level, we're all human. We all have more in common with each other than we have differences. However, there are projects where you as a researcher or a field worker are really going to struggle if you don't have that life experience. And I'm going to share with you again a few examples of projects that I've worked on that illustrate this point rather well. So this first study was looking for Black and Asian young adults in London with a preference towards Jamaican people. 8 people for an online diary, 18 to 30 years old, all consumers of a particular drink called Magnum tonic wine. Now, I'm going to hazard a guess that very few of you have ever tasted or even heard of Magnum. It's sold in many off licenses in London, but it's particularly popular with Jamaicans, hence the recruitment spec. The project manager that was given this project was it was given to the most senior PM of the team. 20 years in experience in field work, knows all the tricks, but when she saw the spec, well, she nearly had a meltdown. We're never going to be able to recruit this. Theo, you've costed this way too low. We're going to need a specialist recruiter for this. Now, me being half Jamaican and growing up in Tottenham around many people of Caribbean descent, I knew how popular the drink was. I knew that pretty much any of our London recruiters would be able to at least reach a few Jamaicans, and from that, we could either recruit the project normally, or if necessary, maybe snowball it from the few that we get, but we could get it done, which is why I costed it at a standard FMCG project. She was adamant, this is never going to get done with our recruiters. We need a specialist. We need to go back to the client and increase the cost, yada, yada, yada. To cut a long story short, I eventually convinced her to give our usual recruiters a try, and lo and behold, they recruited the project within a few days, no problem at all. But had I not been there, what would have happened in this situation? It just goes to show that all the credentials, all the years of experience and expertise don't amount to much when you have no clue about the audience that you're targeting. This project highlights the point on the researcher side of the desk. So this was years ago. We had a really interesting project that came in that wanted to conduct 8 IDIs with single Muslim women who were open to the idea of arranged marriage. The whole topic to me seemed rather sensitive, and some of the wording used in the screener seemed a bit off, but our job was to recruit the participants, and we managed to do that just fine. The client, had also asked us to provide the moderator, and we had a number of freelancers that we normally reach out to. So we ended up booking a white lady who I won't mention in case she's watching this webinar, but she's really great at what she does. So yeah, we booked her for the project, and the project went ahead. The interviews were completed, and called up the client for a debrief afterwards and asked, had they managed to get some good insights? I was curious. The client told me that actually the feedback was pretty limited. The main takeaways they got were that women do consider arranged marriages, and when they pressed for the reasons why, they mentioned religion, and that's just how things are done in their culture, but it was pretty much all they got from all 8 of the women, which didn't really seem to give them much at all, and they felt that the moderator didn't do enough to gain the insights they were looking for. Okay, disappointing. A few weeks later, they came back to us asking if we could recontact the 8 participants for a second round of interviews. Only this time, they would use their own moderator. So we made the recontacts, and the new moderator handled these interviews. After the second round was complete, I called the client to debrief and again asked how it all went. Did they get better insights this time? Oh, Theo, it was night and day. They told us about family reputation, upholding family traditions, respecting their parents, obedience, the fact that you don't have any freedom until you're married, you can't have boyfriends or girlfriends, and they all seem to have this view that the future of and financial stability being more important than their love life. I'm thinking, whoa, what did this new moderator do? Like, how was she able to get so much more out of them than our moderator, who's super qualified, super experienced? Well, it turns out their moderator was South Asian Muslim. She knew the issues herself. The women immediately felt understood and were able to open up to her in ways that they would never do to quote unquote outsider. These things being so far from British culture and values. Again, a clear example that without at least some level of empathy, it's difficult to gather insights on sympathy alone. Now, with all that said, what I don't want to do is leave you with the message that unless you're from a certain cultural group, you shouldn't be working on those projects, because that's not the message I'm trying to deliver. Yes, white researchers can certainly research ethnic communities, but it takes thought. It means taking the time to really educate and familiarize yourself with the cultural differences and nuances of that community you're trying to research. A great example is this amazing piece of work from Conrad Kaleo of Craft Human Intelligence titled Lessons from the Frontline. For this project, Conrad was discussing one of the most taboo topics of all, Islamist terrorism, with young British, Somali, and British Pakistani men. I mean, it doesn't get much more sensitive than that, guys. Conrad won awards for this work, and I'm sure some of you have probably seen it because I know the ICG posted about it and congratulated him when he did. But the point I want to highlight here is that this wasn't just something thrown together like any other project. Conrad spent time integrating with the community, getting to know them, gaining their trust. The project lasted a whole year. So no, not every project researching ethnic communities would require a white researcher to go, as deep into the trenches as Conrad did, but it will require some additional time and effort to understand the people you're dealing with. And if possible, you should always seek to at least consult someone from those communities who can help you navigate those differences. I think that's quite logical. But when does it matter? I'm sure some of you are thinking, this is all well and nice, but for a lot of the time, the ethnicity of the participants doesn't matter. If I'm just talking to landlords about boilers, who cares if they're all white, right? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it does matter. How can we measure the importance of the insights we never got? Now, I love to cook. I cook for the family, and I love cooking dishes I've never tried before. Let's say I've chosen a dish to cook and followed the recipe, but while cooking, I've forgotten one key ingredient. The result is probably going to taste pretty good. The family are all going to eat it, no complaints. But is the dish actually what I set out to make? No, it isn't. Would I be able to tell the difference between what I'm tasting and what the dish is actually meant to taste like? No, I wouldn't. Likewise, the results of your research may be good. You may get some great insights, but the insights you missed may be game-changing. How would you know? The final thing I want to talk to you about today is about normalizing the conversation. And there's so much anxiety around the topic of race. Everyone's scared to say the wrong thing. I can't tell you how many times I've been speaking to someone and witnessed them hesitate before saying the word black, like it's an offensive term. It's time to open up. It's time for a mindset shift. If we can't have the conversation, how are we going to find solutions? Talk about race. Talk about race with your colleagues, your friends, your children. The more we talk about it, the more we see it. The more we see it, the better our chances of fixing it. And on that note, let's talk about it. If you have any questions, please do ask. And thanks so much for listening to me today. I really appreciate it.
Wow, that was fantastic, Theo. Thank you so much. That was really refreshing. And I just can't believe how far you've come in core in such a short space of time. So yeah, brilliant webinar. So we've got a couple of questions or remarks, really more than questions, I think. Let me read those out. So this person is wondering if we're doing a few focus groups testing some communication materials, e.g. with images of people, wouldn't a non-white person in a predominantly white group feel uncomfortable to call out any racist issues? Of course, the black person has to mention that there are no black people in the material, for example. And what would it be like if in such a communication test we had 2 white groups and 1 non-white group, where everyone in the group could call racist issues and we could get some more depth on them as well?
So that was a lot. Let me just break that down. The question is whether they can talk about it in the same group.
Yeah, I guess it's really debating whether or not it's better to have mixed groups or whether
Right.
it's better for non-white people to be in a group amongst themselves so that they're more comfortable at raising any issues.
I mean, To be honest, there's going to be a mixed school of thought here. I'm of the school that, you know, we need to normalize this conversation. We need to allow people the freedom to say what they think. You know, us sort of policing everyone on what they say is where we get into these sort of unconscious biases and this you know, I think it but I won't say it, but then it comes out in my actions. I would personally prefer everyone in the group to say it if they think that that's racist or they think that that's inappropriate. Say it out loud and let's all discuss it. There will be some people who disagree with me, so I I don't actually know what the answer is. Maybe we try them both and see what works better.
Yeah, and maybe it's down to some extent to the moderator making sure that everybody in the group feels comfortable enough to be able to voice their opinions.
Exactly.
Okay. Somebody has asked, how can organizations help with CORE?
So I had the slide in there with the allyship. So there's different things as well because I didn't talk about the strategic partnerships, but we are working on and building partnerships with a lot of different research agencies, trying to put some data behind the claims, if you will. You know, we want to make sure that the case is there for everything that we talk about. So we'll be doing research, primary research, secondary research, talking with people in the industry about their views, talking to ethnic professionals about how they feel about diversity in their company and you know progression opportunities, and we want to keep that conversation going, and we really the partnerships of organizations is how that's going to come about. There's obviously sponsorships for if an organization wants to actually support us and support our initiatives and push them forward, then you know funding some of them will definitely be a help. But there's a number of different ways on an organizational level. um, I'm more, you know, I like the individual ones. They make my heart warmer. But yeah, the organizations is definitely how we make big change.
Okay, we've got another one asking how volunteers can get involved. What do
Yeah.
you recommend
So
for that?
again, the same slide there with the allyship opportunities. We've got so for volunteers in particular, we've got a number of different roles that we're actually really trying to fill right now. So if anyone is really interested, please do get in touch because we're just about to expand the team to, you know, between 20 and 30 people. We've got, you know, a lot of predefined roles that we really need help with. So there might be a slot for you to fit in there. But then offer that as well, there's the master classes. If you've got a really specialist skill and you want to contribute to the mentorship, then you can help us by sharing that knowledge. There's the allyship, whereby let's say you've got a big following, social media or an email list or something, then you know the next time we're trying to make some noise about something that we're doing, you will help us make that noise via your networks. So there's several different ways, but everyone, this core is for everybody. I know it's very ethnic because that's where the problem is and that's what we're trying to fix, but it's a community that we want everyone involved in, and we need the help of everybody if we're going to fix this.
Fantastic. So lots of opportunities there for people who want to get involved. Yeah. Okay. Another question. If we have a research project that is ethnically focused, but we don't have anyone in the company who can relate, how do we best go about it?
Okay. So I did touch on this in our spotlight initiative. So the diversity directory is what we've called it, and what we're trying to do there is pool all of these freelancers and professionals who would be able to help you with something like that. It's still in the making. We've got a short list of around 20 or so right now, but it's not published yet. But you know, even going through LinkedIn, if you know, they're out there. You just have to look for them. There's Black moderators, there's Chinese moderators, there's Indian moderators. So, you know, you can find them, but we're going to do what we can to make that as easy as possible as well.
Fantastic. If we have open jobs that we want to fill with more ethnically diverse people, can we work with CORE?
Absolutely. So the job board page on the website is a bit barren right now, but we're actively now touting to different agencies across the industry to say, you know, if you've got any vacancies, can you make any vacancies, give us those job posts. And then we're going to be partnering with various different recruitment agencies. I've actually got a conversation with one at 2 p.m. today, which would be ideal if we can make this partnership. But they would then be able to feed in their networks of these candidates from outside of the industry who are from ethnic backgrounds, and you know, they can help us fill those roles. So we'll be really connecting the dots. That'll be CORE's role.
Okay, and then I just want to come back to, because I think we've got another comment, this idea of whether it's better to have mixed groups or separate groups to create the environment where people will open up. So one person's come back and said they don't think people will actually express themselves if they're in mixed groups. So do you have anything more to add to that discussion?
As I said, it's you know, I'm not the oracle. I could be completely wrong on that. You know, it's my opinion that I think that everyone should be more open and talk about it. But perhaps the right approach is to separate them and see what comes out that way. I think let's try it. Let's try it and see what happens.
So it's experiment and then see where it works best.
Exactly.
Okay. I think that's all the questions, unless there's anybody else want to send something in very quickly. But otherwise, lots of very positive feedback, Theo. Brilliant webinar. Thank you so much. Lots of food for thought. Fantastic webinar. Really made me reflect on my own assumptions. Thank you. So lots of positive feedback. One more question. Any core events we should know of? Is there anything you've got in the pipeline that you want to?
Yes, indeed. The next roundtable, I believe it's scheduled for sometime in December. We'll be putting out the comms pretty soon. That's going to be, I believe, on the BAME, the BAME, you know, whatever we call it, the BAME
of BAME.
Pros and cons and how we get around it and XYZ. We're going to be having some thought leaders, some real experts speaking. As I say, these roundtable sessions, they're our way of building the guidelines that we feel the industry is waiting for. So there's going to be really some thought-provoking stuff there. So definitely sign up to that. And then off of that, you know, next year, hopefully, if we can get out of this COVID, then we'll finally be able to do some face-to-face events. I can't wait for one of those.
That sounds really exciting. I think we'll all look forward to that. It'd be nice to get off the video and move into face-to-face environments. Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you, Theo. Thanks once again. As I say, it was an absolutely amazing webinar. Lots of food for thought, and I just can't get over how much you guys have achieved in such a short space of time. It's really amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we've got a really passionate team, so it's, you know, it's been hard work, but with passion, anything is possible, you know. But thanks so much for the opportunity to talk here today. It's really my honor to talk to this community because you guys are close to my heart as well.
Brilliant. Okay, and thanks to everybody for listening in. We do hope you will join us again in 2 weeks' time when we've got our first ever, I think, broadcast live chat with some very high-profile business leaders, Eric Salamar and Dominic Proctor. So don't forget to sign up for that one. It should be a really interesting discussion. Okay, that's it for today. Thank you very much again, Theo. Thanks to everybody for listening in, and look forward to hearing or seeing or you listening in again in the future. Bye for now.